Friends, welcome to another edition of the Synod podcast. And today my guest is the Reverend David Ireland. David has recently retired. He's a 13-month retired minister, but somebody who's done an extraordinary amount in the time that he's been in ministry. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. David, you've described your life as very blessed.
Very blessed, and I think I said to you earlier, Lawrence, I've always felt like my jobs were playing out. I've never really felt as if I was going to work in the various things that I've done. So yeah, very blessed.
That's great. I mean, I was fascinated to discover all the different facets to your life and work and ministry. You're a trained architect. You had your pilot's wings at 17. You've been consulted by people in Japan, in Sarajevo, and all over the world. And you've run and been the CEO of Francis House, which is a children's hospice, and built it up so that it's been a place that's had extraordinary influence in children's palliative care, hasn't it?
It has, and Francis House has gone from something that was very small to something that is now regarded worldwide as a place of excellence and something to be emulated. And it's not just about the buildings, it's about the people that work there and the way in which they care for families who are at the rock bottom when they've been given a diagnosis that their child or young person has got a life-limiting condition.
So let's go back to the start about your call to ministry. You grew up as one of 4 children?
No, one of 5. And in addition to the 5 kids, which was a small family in those days, we had families in our brigade at church that were 12, 13 kids in the family. So it wasn't a big family. And my mother fostered short term. So we actually had people who came to live with us for short periods. It was a very happy family home. I was very blessed there.
Your brother, Philip, with whom you were very, very close.
Yeah.
He died under tragic circumstances, and that had an influence on your call to ministry, didn't it?
Well, at the time Philip died, I was 25, he was 23, and he died in a tragic accident in West Germany. So I was at the time doing my postgraduate training as an architect, and whilst I was doing my final thesis, which involved, for architects, the final thesis involved designing a building and producing all the drawings. Whilst I was doing this, I was travelling backwards and forwards to West Germany and trying to resolve difficulties with getting Philip's body back to the UK with his friend Danny, who was also killed. That was what really made me begin to think about faith and about life and death. I'd always been involved in the Boys' Brigade as a kid. I'd got to the stage where I was moving on into adult life and was less involved. And then Philip died, and I had to make a decision. You either become very angry with God or move away from God altogether. But in my instance, the church was so supportive, the people were so supportive of my family and of me that I became more involved. I was BB captain and became more involved in the leadership of the church, and felt a call to train for ordination at that time. By the time I started to do something about it, I was married, practicing as an architect, and my wife wasn't very happy about me giving up what was a promising career and a decent salary to go back to train to be a minister. She'd supported me through 7 years of college as an architect. And so I put off the decision for 5 or 6 years And then the synod moderator at the time was Tony Burnham, and he and the Reverend Graham Cook were promoting non-stipendiary ministry.
Right.
And this seemed like the way forward for me. I could still carry on with my architectural career, but train for ordination on a part-time basis and become a non-stipendiary minister. And so I enrolled at Luther King House, and that was the beginning of my ministry.
Right. And you were ordained and inducted into non-stipendiary ministry in 1995, was it?
1995, and at that time, Tony had gone down to be General Secretary, and Keith Forecast was the moderator.
Right.
And ministers, non-stipendiary ministers, were being ordained as district ministers then to serve the whole district. Union Street had been without a minister for a long time, and there was a desperate need to do something, and there was no way they were going to partner with anybody else. And so Keith asked me if I would go to Union Street for 12 months whilst they resolved what was going to happen. That was 1995. And so I spent a lot of my time at Union Street, Oldham, and every other week I was preaching in other churches around the district.
You were asked to look after Union Street, particularly for a year in 1995?
In 1995.
And when did that year finish?
Well, it's still going at the moment. I'm still preaching there once or twice a month. Oldham in that time has changed phenomenally. People have moved out away from the town centre. Oldham has become a predominantly Muslim town, but there are lots of people who need support living in the low-cost accommodation. And Union Street has been involved in setting up the town centre chaplaincy,
Right.
which has been a great support through a period of great change in the town for the people in the shop.
So let's talk about Francis House, which again has been something as a place in which you've been involved since 1989.
Yeah.
And in 1989, am I right? It was one of 4 children's hospices.
It was the 5th children's hospice. Britain led the way in children's hospices. They hadn't been known anywhere else, and the first was in Cambridge, set up by an Anglican nun, Sister Francis Dominica. Francis House was established with the lead coming from a Franciscan nun, a Catholic nun, Sister Aloysius, who was a phenomenal lady, who actually got the charity registered, and within 22 months we had got a house open working as a hospice, and it was opened by Princess Diana. And I was employed initially as the architect for Francis House. A young architect, they put a lot of trust into me, in my abilities, but I'd already worked for the sisters on the Rescue Society buildings, and I'd become very friendly with the Rescue Society secretary, Father Tom Mulheron, who was also one of the trustees. So I was employed to get this building off the ground with very little money, and Sister Aloysius actually kicked the sisters out of the convent, and I was given the convent to convert. So the original part of the building is a 1956 convent.
Right.
And the sisters were sent to other places. I had to find them other accommodation. And like I say, we had the place open within 2 years. Most children's hospices, even now, take 8 to 10 years from inception to opening. Francis House did it in less than 2 years, and that was because of faith. Faith was at the key of everything that was done, and the belief that the need was there for the families. And Sister Aloysius was brilliant at bullying people into giving money and loaning money. And when I took over from her in 2005, she owed the bishop £1.4 million, which I had to pay back, which was
Oh,
a bit
my
of a
goodness.
daunting figure. But we did it, and thanks to the generosity of the people of the Northwest, we were able to build on what she'd provided to start with. The families that come to Francis House are desperately in need of support, and the numbers are going up quicker than we can expand to provide the service for them. That was the hospice that I took over in 2005. There were then 38 staff and 185 families on the roll. And when I finished in 2025, the number of families was over 500 having support, and staff was about 120, which is a big salary to find. But like I said, the generosity of the people of Northwest has meant that we've been able to stay stable even during COVID.
I mean, it wasn't without personal cost that move from a national firm of architect to CEO of Francis House, where you were effectively on a minister's stipend.
Well, my poor wife supported me through architectural college, and then I told her that I wanted to be a minister. And we were just getting to the point where we had a decent standard of living, and with two girls at school, and I decided then that I would take this role at Francis House. That's how we worked to keep the costs down. And when I finished, we got it such a finely tuned organisation that 90 pence in every pound donated went to the care of the children.
So you haven't wasted any money, you haven't wasted any time either, because you and Judith, your wife, you adopted Paula and Susie, who was 7 and 8 at the start.
Yeah.
So as well as an incredibly busy job, you've got a busy home life, but you didn't simply just keep Francis House going. The expanded, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, locally, the hospice care had to change because of changing times. In the mid-90s, very few of our young people lived beyond the age of 16. However, medical advances have meant that young people are living longer, but with ever increasing problems. And we've now got about 180, 190 young adults who are living into their 20s. Not many go beyond 25. As they get older, their problems increase. There is more medication required, more specialised care. But also the parents get older, and the parents struggle more because it's unrelenting. It's 24-hour care. The big worry is what happens to their children if they die before them. So that we'd decided that we needed to do something more specialised for teenagers and young adults, and provide a different form of respite care and a different form of nursing care. And with Father Mulheron, we persuaded the Catholic Rescue Society to give us 2 semi-detached houses further down Parleswood Road in Didsbury. And we converted those into a mini hospice. And whilst we were using that as a teenagers' hospice, we employed Manchester University to do independent research into the needs of the teenagers and their families, and used the building as a model for them to see what was working or wasn't working. And that informed the brief for us to build a new building on the site of the old Rescue Society offices, which I built in 1986. Now you're getting old when you start knocking down buildings that you built. So we actually built the teenager young adults unit, and that was opened by William and Kate, Prince William and Kate, in 2016. And we then had this other building that was a good facility, the 2 semi-detached houses, and we'd realised that there were young people whose families could no longer care for them. And if you need nursing care at 22 and you have to go into a care home, the only care home that provides you with the nursing care you need because of the drugs you need is a dementia home. Well, it's not right for young people who are articulate and sentient to be shoved in a dementia home. So we set up a residential scheme for young people, 7 young people, all with very complex conditions, living together in what basically became like a student flat each, but with full-time nursing care and social support and psychological support with it. It's about living short lives to the maximum and achieving as much as you can. And just before I retired, we managed to get hold of another 2 semi-detached houses, which we converted into a 6-bed unit for young adults, again, with life-limiting conditions, but who couldn't move very well. They can't look after themselves in any way. They can't talk very well. So they're very much reliant on care. And that's a different environment again, because the parents can come and go as they please, but they don't have the unremitting care which they would normally have 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
So you've established Francis House. You've established a place for teenagers and young adults, a family home environment for students and their needs, and a place for kids who can't move or speak. This is all pioneering stuff, and it's getting known, isn't it, more widely. Can you tell us how you came then to be involved in Chernobyl and Sarajevo? Because there's a direct connection, isn't there?
Well, that goes back earlier days, Chernobyl. But the young people who were affected by Chernobyl were coming to England and being supported for holidays, and people got to know them. And there were some brilliant little charities set up to support them. But then they grew, and as they grew, they got into relationships, and they had children of their own, and their children were born with significant oncology problems as a result of the fallout. And so we were asked if we could help set up pain relief, because there was no pain relief in Belarus for the young people that were affected. They didn't have morphine, they didn't have any way, even paracetamol was not fully available. And so we actually had a nurse who went over there to begin to start up a pain clinic, and we had equipment that we couldn't use in this country, not because it wasn't working, but because the government deemed it needed to be updated so that we complied with hospital requirements. And so we were able to take this equipment out, we were able to train people and set up pain clinics in Belarus. And that has led to a different attitude to pain relief. If we go back to when we started in the 80s, when the Children's Hospice movement started, that was how it was in this country. People believed children didn't feel pain the same way as adults. So they weren't given morphine, they were treated with aspirin. And, it was a very different attitude, and we've had to educate people in this country. And the same was happening in Belarus. And there's a shortage of cash, but we were able to help by setting up pain clinics and by providing people to train nurses there how to use the equipment. And the principal thing we did was we had to update our syringe drivers with the things that give morphine at the end of life to comply with the hospital, Manchester Children's Hospital, and the other equipment we had before we sent out there, and that made such a significant difference to many children's lives.
Right. And then 10 years after Radovan Karadzic had been deposed in Sarajevo, you got the call.
Well, when Radovan Karadzic was in power, he surrounded Sarajevo. You'll remember it being on the radio, on the news, and he was bombing to ethnic cleanse. And one of the things he did was bomb the children's hospital. And again, there was no pain relief for the children. And one of the St. Gemma sisters from St. Gemma's at Leeds had been out there trying to provide some way of providing pain relief. And we got involved in that. We set up a pain clinic in Sarajevo. Now, at that time, there was a hospital I was told it was on the outskirts of Sarajevo. It was actually 6 hours drive away. But this hospital had got a boiler house, which they wanted to convert into a children's hospice. But the hospital had NGO money, international money being poured into it. But the mafia were actually taking the money from the hospital. And so the NGOs said, we'll put money in if you partner with a centre of excellence in UK or in America. And they contacted us through the St. Gemma nun. Margaret Hickey, the head nurse at the time, and I went out to Sarajevo. It was a frightening time, even 10 years after Radim Karadzic. Every inch of land in Sarajevo had got graves on it. The grass verge down the middle of the road on the dual carriageway had graves all down it. The place was beaten by war. So we were asked to provide support for this children's hospice that was going to be built, which, as I say, was 6 hours away from Sarajevo. We went there and I met the hospital engineer and the hospital managing director, and they gave us an old boiler house which was being converted into a children's hospice. There was no building regulations, no planning regulations, no health and safety, no fire officers, nothing. And I met the engineer and I was doing drawings on the photocopying paper, and they were building it as I was doing the drawings. Within 12 or 13 months, they had actually opened a children's hospice. It was a great experience. It was frightening. I'd never ever slept in a hotel room before with bullet holes in the wall. And you don't know when they actually arrived there, but you wouldn't.
So, David, you've become somebody who is renowned as an expert internationally in children's palliative care and the architecture of hospices in nursing care and pain relief. You've done that work in Romania and Montenegro.
Yeah.
You've been asked to lecture.
Yeah.
Tell us about the phone call from Yokohama in Japan in 2017.
Well, Mr. Tagawa-san, he's an amazing man who had a daughter who died with a brain tumour, and she wanted to walk on the grass before she died, and the hospital authorities wouldn't allow it. And that's because in Japan, they believe that the machines solve everything. So you can actually, a child is diagnosed with a condition, they put them on machines in ICU, intensive care unit, and the machines that go ping keep them going. Now, it's an awful environment for children to be in, and they're surrounded by people who have got life-threatening conditions. The parents are allowed 1 hour a day to visit. So there was a whole philosophy that had to be changed. And initially, Jill Bevin, who was then the head nurse of Francis House, and I went out with Tagawa-san to go around the children's hospitals and try and re-educate people into the need for the sort of care that Francis House gives. And it's not about the building, it's the philosophy and the ethos and the way in which the families are able to live their lives with this thing hanging over. Yeah, we went out and went round the hospitals, and then the following year I was asked to be the keynote speaker at the International Paediatric Palliative Care Conference, which sounds very grand, in Yokohama. And I think I said to you before, normally when you go to a conference in this country, they tell you where the toilets are and the fire exits. In Yokohama, they say in the event of earthquake, and that sets you up for your lecture then, because you're wondering whether there's going to be an earthquake. Mr. Tagawa was going to do something in setting up the first independent hospice, and he was given a site down near the dock by the government to build it on, which sounds great, but that site had earthquake problems and the threat of tsunami because it was at water level. So I got involved with their architect, looking at the design of a children's hospice, but also looking at how we could build it in a way that it was homely, but it dealt with the problems of tsunamis. So all of the living accommodation is way up at first floor level above a concrete bunker, which has all the storage and the facilities for equipment and the boiler rooms and things. So that in the event of tsunami, they're not flooded out. And that's something that you have to think about, even in this country. For us, if there's a fire, we run out of the fire exit. For the young people at Francis House, if there's a fire, they might be on oxygen. They might need continual piped oxygen. They might need evacuation with special clinical input. So it's not easy to actually evacuate a building like that. And currently I'm talking to a guy called Dr. Kazoo, who is in Aichi province. That's the Toyota town, and Toyota are going to be helping to fund a children's hospice there. There's also the potential for a hospice on the island of Kyushu, one of the South Islands.
Yes, I'm still trying to imagine any other British architect being asked to design a building that's tsunami-proof. As you said earlier, David, Francis House has become a place that's known throughout the world. Latvia, Czech Republic, Australia, USA. But it's not only known by folk who are dealing with palliative care in buildings. Tell us a story about the Easter Chick.
Oh yes, the Easter Chick campaign, which many people I know in the URC are supporting, knitted Easter chicks with a Cadbury's Easter egg inside. And we were selling them for £1, and we had little old ladies, a bit like shredded wheat. We were little old ladies knitting chicks, and we made about £500 each year with them, and it was great. But then we put the patent on the World Wide Web, and suddenly people were knitting for Francis House in Australia and Japan and China and America and Canada. And even a group of women in Uganda, supported by a charity from Manchester, were knitting chicks for Francis House in the open air under a tree. And we had to send out plastic eggs because Easter eggs would melt in the heat. But they actually were being paid by the charity to knit chicks for Francis House, and that provided money for them to give their daughters education, because in Uganda it's the boys who get the education. And so it's like a double whammy. But the chick campaign has become such a big thing now, and last year it raised over £74,000.
£74,000,
yes.
Goodness.
And they go all over the world. And in fact, going back to Yokohama, at the beginning of one of the conferences, a man stood up at the back of this huge auditorium. "I've got one of your chicks," he shouted at me, and he held it up. And somebody has knitted a chick, actually, for me, which I have on my piano, which is in a dog collar and has a cross round its neck, which I quite like and treasure.
And so next week you're off to the palace, because of your British Empire medal.
Yes.
That won't surprise people, I think, after hearing what you've been telling us. But what they can't see is you roll your eyes and blush when I mention the medal. But tell us about it, David.
Well, it's a great thing for the team at Francis House, and it is a team job. You talk about what we've done around the world. It's a whole team that is behind me, and I think, it's important to say that I'm one of these people who delegates and stands back and lets people get on with things. And it's good people. Surround yourself with good people and things will happen. But it's a pleasure to be able to go down, and Mrs. Ireland's already got the dress. It's cost me a fortune.
Keith Forecast, a beloved former moderator of the Northwestern Synod, said of you, David Ireland's a team player as long as it's his rule book and he's the team captain. Is that a fair description?
I took it as a compliment. I think it is. I feel, as I said earlier, I feel blessed in the people that I'm surrounded by, and both in the church and in Francis House and in my life generally. I've just met so many wonderful people who all show love and concern and make me feel that there is hope for this world that we live in, because we're living in a world where there's so much war and selfishness and power grabbing, and the news is appalling. And yet, Francis House, £5 million, only 20% comes from government each year. And it's the people of the Northwest, this great raft of love and care, that keep Francis House going. And it's the same within the United Reformed Church. People, dedicated, committed Christians, working quietly, keeping the church going, but not only that, affecting the communities they live in.
David, it's been a delight to talk to you. Thank you for giving up your time. And can I say, an extraordinary response to God's call all those years ago. We wish you God's richest blessings on you as you retire. Thank you.
Thank you.